Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night I got to see Scream, the 2022 version, and yes, this is Scream 5. I'm going to go ahead and just call it Scream 5, it's just easier that way. And also this is going to be a full spoiler review, okay, which obviously, you know, especially with this movie, means I'm going to be talking about who the killer is and the big twist and all that stuff. So yeah, obviously if you have not seen the movie yet, you don't want to watch this because I'm gonna spoil like the biggest thing about these movies is who is the killer. So yeah, here we go. Okay, so Scream 2022. It has been it's hard to believe that it's already been 10 years since the last Scream, because the last Scream 4, it still feels really modern, you know, because it was like in 2011, you know. But yeah, it's been another 10 years already, and I'm starting to feel pretty old now. Oh man. Anyways, so this is obviously, you know, the franchise is super meta. That's like its entire gimmick is how meta it is, right? It is the Deadpool of horror movies. But you know, it's not meta in the sense that it's like looking at the camera, but it is definitely like it knows what movie it is, and the characters know what movie they're on, you know. And yeah, I gotta say, this movie had me worried. It had me so worried walking into it because, you know, I saw the trailer several months ago, and to be honest with you, the trailers didn't inspire much confidence. The trailers didn't look that good, and I was like, oh man, you know, this is the first Scream movie without Wes Craven, who, you know, he passed away in 2015, and also this movie's coming out in January, you know, so I was like, oh man, this might be bad, which that really sucks because I really love this franchise. I really do. You know, I think this franchise, you know, now we're on number 5. I think this franchise has more, it's more consistent and it's of better quality than most horror franchises. I would say almost all of them, because pretty much every other horror franchise, they start off really, really strong, and then around number 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 or whatever, they just take this drastic dip in quality. But Scream is one where it's like, okay, number 3 not so great, but 4 brought it back, and I'm happy to say number 5 here in 2022, really great. This one is really, really great. To be honest with you, my ranking of all the Scream movies, I think it's number 4, number 1, 2, and then 3. And here we are with number 5. I'm struggling, guys. I don't know if this one's my favorite or if I still like 4 a little bit more, but it's like right there. It's kind of fighting for that second spot against the original Scream. I really, really enjoyed this movie. It fully knows what it is. It knows what it's doing. You know, since 2011 we have entered this age of the sequel / reboots. You know, of course they bring up everything. They bring up Star Wars. They bring up the new Halloween movies. You know, they bring up all these franchises that, like, okay, reboots don't work anymore. You can't you know, this is like actual dialogue from this movie. You can't just reboot a movie. You have to keep the legacy characters around, and you have to make it sort of a sequel, and everything is sort of tied to those original movies, but you still have to introduce all these fresh elements as if it were a reboot, you know. And so the characters have this dialogue, and it just works really well because of how much they know what they are, and they know how to play with that, you know, because it's been a while, you know. This is definitely a post Force Awakens movie, and what I mean by that is they saw how the sequel trilogy played out, they saw how everything went, and they saw the fan reaction. And let me tell you this right now, if you are a Star Wars fan and you have been invested in the online fandom chatter for the last several years, if you've seen all the crazy nonsense that gets put on YouTube and Twitter and all this stuff, if you've seen the fighting and all the little sections of the Star Wars fandom, and you've seen like the people who try to like politicize it and all that, this is the movie for you, because you're gonna watch this movie, and I tweeted about this. You're gonna watch this movie and you're gonna be like, oh shit, yeah, I know exactly specifically who they're referencing here. Oh god damn it, those people. And this movie knows how to make fun of those people in a really good way. It's not like a super like, oh, aren't these people stupid? But it's also like, okay, we know why these people are so angry. And I'm just gonna, this is the first semi-spoiler here. The villain, especially there's two villains, big surprise, there's two. But one of the villains is literally an angry, toxic fanboy who's so mad that the Stab franchise, the in-universe movie Stab franchise, lost its way because of a Rian Johnson directed 8th entry. It's like, okay, all right, I see what you're doing. This is basically the writers got together and they're like, hey, what if one of those fanboys who got super angry about The Last Jedi, what if they went insane and they tried to force their own Star Wars movie? What if they tried to create their own Star Wars movie? The only, the difference here being it's a horror movie, so in order to create their own horror movie, they have to kill people, so that's, at the very least, that's one of their motivations. But yeah, that was just being part. I think that enhanced this movie a lot for me, and that's why it's like, oh man, this might be my number one. It's kind of struggling, it might be my favorite Scream movie, just because I've been such a part of seeing all of this, all the real life Star Wars fandom nonsense. It's like, oh man, this it really hit me, and I was like, oh god, I love this. I love everything they're doing about it. It's not too much, you know what I mean? It would have been really easy to take that, like, oh, the villain is a toxic fanboy. It would have been easy to take that concept and like push it too far to where like, okay, now it's just too on the nose. And I feel like they did it just enough, like they make it clear that that's what's happening here, but they don't like push it over the top. They don't be like, they don't have the good guys saying like those movies were good actually and then kill the bad guy. It's like, no, they don't do that, but it's just having that be one of the motivations is amazing. And yeah, so just let's talk about kind of the plot of what's happening here. So our new main character, one of them gets attacked at the very beginning of the movie, and so that character's sister shows up, and she's actually, I guess you would say, the main character is the sister of the girl who gets attacked at the beginning, and then of course, they're like these estranged sisters who haven't seen each other in a couple years, and there's this whole like mysterious backstory as to like, well, what happened here? Why did she leave town? Why did she leave her sister? And as it turns out, the main girl, the older sister here, she is the daughter of Billy Loomis. So her mom at some point in high school got pregnant from Billy, and then lied to her current boyfriend, who was a different guy, and said like, oh, I'm pregnant, let's get married. And so that's like what their entire marriage was kind of based on. And then they had a second daughter who was the younger sister, and so at some point years ago, the older sister had found this out, and it caused this huge rift in the family, and they all broke apart. And so she kind of blames herself for that. And also another twist, which I think this works, and it really easily could have not worked, but I think it did. The older sister, she sees the ghost of Billy Loomis, not a real ghost, but like in her mind, she sees him in reflections and mirrors and stuff like that, and that so easily could have gotten stupid, but they do it like in these little glimpses. Most of the time he doesn't talk. Every once in a while, he'll like talk to her directly and be like, hey, you know, you're the daughter of a serial killer. You got to use that. It's inside you, you know. But oddly enough, she uses it to survive and fight off the real serial killers. And the way she uses it at the end, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, she grabs a knife and she just goes to town on one of the serial killers in like a really brutal, crazy way that Sidney has never done. You know, like Sidney would shoot the serial killer in the head and be like, all right, cool, movie over. But this girl went insane on one of the serial killers, and it was like the audience was cheering and going like, yeah, you know, get him. Man, and by the way, watching this with an audience was really great. Dewey gets a moment, and we're going to talk about Dewey in a second. Dewey gets a moment against the killer, and everyone went wild. Everyone's like, yeah, Dewey, woo. And like, you know, the audience was not packed, because obviously this is not Spider-Man, right? But everyone who was there was like fully invested, and you could feel it. This was hitting with the audience. So, you know, I don't know how well this is going to do in the box office, but I can tell you, I think critically, for like the fans of this franchise, it's going to work a lot. Because dang, it was really, really good. Anyways, so yeah, basically, you know, they do the whole murder mystery thing, and it all works really well. Dewey is there for the first half of the movie, and unfortunately, you know, he's the first one of the legacy characters to come in, and they directly call him a legacy character, which is pretty great, you know. And he basically gets Han Solo'd, you know, where it's like, oh, one of the legacy characters has to die, and the villains say this, right? Because they're like, yeah, it's a sequel reboot. The legacy character has to die. That way, you know, there's stakes, you know. So he's the Han Solo of this movie. So he does get killed. I will say his death, man, it was good. I would say it was a good death. I don't know. He had shot this, you know, he shot Ghostface, and they were about to escape, but then he stops and goes back, and he's like, you have to shoot him in the head. If you don't shoot him in the head, that means he's just gonna come back to life in a second, right? Which he's right. You know, this is a lesson that they actively have learned throughout the franchise, you know. But he goes to do it, and then he has his gun pointed at the Ghostface killer, and then his phone rings at the last second, and so he looks down, and that gives Ghostface enough time to get back up and stab him a couple times, and there goes Dewey. He's gone, which is like, dang, that's a shame. Oddly enough, the call was from Gale, so they never got to have like their last conversation, and oh man, it was pretty sad. You hate to see Dewey go, but you kind of figure that's it. You know, you knew someone was gonna go this time, especially like Dewey's in a really rough spot in his life, and you kind of figure like, all right, this is like his last heroic moment, you know. You felt it going in, but it still was like, oh man, that not Dewey, you know. Dewey was always so great in these movies. But of course, the second half of the movie is when you finally do get Sidney and Gale like fully back in the movie. They were like sprinkled in there a little bit in the first half, but they fully return in the second half of the movie, which I think that's also something that really helps this movie work, is like the good balance of it, because the first half of the movie is very much about the new characters, and then the second half, obviously the new characters are still there and playing their key roles, but they give Sidney and Gale enough of their time together doing their stuff, you know, and they get to handle the fact that Dewey just died, and you know, it all works, you know. I feel like there was a good balance there, that, you know, that you might say, hey, Force Awakens probably could have used more of this kind of balance, you know. Funny enough, talking about sequel reboot type things. And yeah, just luckily Sidney and Gale, they both do live. They survive this movie, and I was so worried because, you know, once again Sidney gets stabbed in the stomach for the second movie in a row, and I was like, oh no, is this it? Because this could be it, you know. Which it's funny in that way that they're so meta that they know what they're doing in this movie. Like, they know what movie this is, because they literally said Dewey has to die, that way the audience is gonna think there's stakes. And it worked though, because when Sidney got stabbed, it was like, oh man, there are stakes. They could do it. They could kill her off. This might be it. But no, they both survive, which I think is for the best, right? Because you don't, kind of just like with Star Wars, you don't want to take them all out at once. Now, if there's a Scream 6, which I have to imagine there will be, is another one of them gonna die? Maybe. I would rather they sit a movie out than have them be killed off. You know what I mean? They could have a very small phone conversation. I'd rather they not be involved and then get killed off again. I'm okay if Scream 6 now just follows the new characters, and then every once in a while they could show Sidney and Gale being fine. Let them live their life. They've earned it, right? Like you got one of the legacy characters, that was dramatic. You can let the other ones live, right? Yeah, they can have their exit out of the franchise and be like, okay, and they went off to live happy lives and it was fine. Yeah, that's kind of what I want to happen. But yeah, so the main girl, she's really good. You know what I mean? The whole Billy Loomis's daughter thing, that angle works really well. Her and her younger sister, who was essentially, after her initial attack, she's basically in the hospital the entire movie, and then even in the final party, which of course they go back to Stu's house and it's a party just like it was in the original one. Even in that party, she's still on crutches and stuff, and she's not, you think she's not going to be of much help, but she ends up having her own hero moment. And I think that's what works really well about the new characters, these two sisters here, is that they get their epic hero moments. And I actually do want to see these sisters moving forward, so the villains, let's just go ahead and talk about the villains again. Obviously spoilers, right? So here we go. So the first villain ends up being the boyfriend of the older sister, Jack Quaid, the actor who's playing him. So it's funny that Dewey called this out immediately, because they go visit Dewey and he's like, how long have you known your boyfriend here? Only 6 months? Did he know who your dad was before this? You should probably check that out, And so, of course, yeah, he was one of the bad guys. And he claims to have never seen the Scream franchise, the Stab franchise. And throughout the movie, he's watching the Stab movies on Netflix. And then we see him watch a YouTube video at some point. We see him watch, essentially one of, basically mocking one of the actual, Star Wars, hate videos on YouTube, where it's this entry did it all wrong. They did this. It's trash. Social commentary, all that stuff, right? He was watching one of those videos, and you think that he's just doing his homework, right? Because he hadn't watched these movies before, so now it makes sense for him to Google everything and watch okay, what's happening, what is the fan situation here. But the big twist ends up being that okay, no, he is one of the angry fanboys already, and that was his entire motivation of being here, was because he wants to set everything up so that way they will make a movie about these events and they can fix Scream 8 by making a new Scream movie, or Stab, sorry, I keep saying Scream, I mean Stab, a new Stab movie. And that seems to be his entire motivation. And he met the other killer on a subreddit, and I love that it would be so easy for them to use oh, this is the new hip social media thing, but it didn't feel that way. It felt natural. They weren't oh, we met each other on the social media. It felt no, they met on a subreddit. They figured out this whole plan. It's yeah, that actually, it didn't feel like this weird, it didn't feel like old people who didn't really understand what was happening on social media wrote those lines. It felt okay, no, yeah, these people, they know what a subreddit is and they use the terminology correctly. So like I said, there are so many things about this movie that could have gone wrong but didn't, and it was actually really good. Anyways, the second killer of this movie was it was the friend. let me see. This is the only one that I'm like, okay, what was her deal exactly? So her family, I guess, was the one who had bought the stew house, right? The house where everything happened at the end of the first movie. So her family had bought this house, and that's how they're at this party at this house now. And I suppose she just got like obsessed with the story and the movies. Now, I might have to do a rewatch, because there were moments where like they kind of established that she's super protective over the little sister. She's even kind of fighting with the older sister, saying like, oh, you're here, I've been the one here, like watching her and taking care of her and stuff like that. And that didn't really seem connected to her motivation at all. So I was a little confused as to like what was going on there. Like why was she so protective of the little sister, and did that have anything to do with wanting to do these murders? It seemed, I don't know, it was a little confusing, and I might have to rewatch it because maybe it'll make more sense on the second run. But yeah, so one of the friends ends up being the killer. And her death scene, by the way, like the Jack Quaid, he's the one who gets like brutally murdered by the main girl, which is, like I said, the audience was cheering and it was pretty awesome. But her death scene was like, oh my god. So basically she's the one that Gale and Sydney get to take out, and she had gotten like a bottle of vodka thrown at her, so she's covered in alcohol, and then she gets pushed into a stove and she's like gets roasted on fire, and it was like, oh Jesus. And then of course she's the one that comes back and she's all half burnt, and oh man, and she gets shot down, so obviously she died. But it was like one of the most brutal ways to take out one of the villains. It was crazy. I did not see that coming. Yeah, a lot of the kills in this movie were like, they were really great kills. They weren't like over the top cartoonish kills. And I think, like was it Halloween Kills, the last Halloween movie that came out? That one had a lot of brutal kills, but at times it felt like, okay, it's too much. I can tell that you're trying to use as much blood as possible. You got the money for it. Whereas this one, like, some of the kills were really brutal, but some of them were really quick and just like, it's like, okay, that's just efficiency here. He's just killing as quickly as he can, So I don't know. It was a good mix, and I think that's what this movie did really well. Everything was balanced. It had funny parts, but not too much funny parts. It had a lot of meta commentary about what it is, but it didn't feel like it was going too far. It felt like it was like, yeah, this is what a Scream movie should be, and it's not like Deadpool. They're not literally looking at the camera or anything like that. And these are things that I was worried about with Wes Craven not being here. I was like, is this new movie gonna be able to feel like a Scream movie? Because it feels like if this was put in the hands of different creators who maybe didn't have as much reverence for the rest of the franchise, it would be really easy to take the idea of a meta horror movie and overdo it. You know what I mean? It seems like it would be really easy for them to like, oh yeah, I know, we're in Scream 5, and this, it's like they didn't go too far. It was a good balance of like, they kind of sort of know, but they don't really know. They're still in their own world, but they're also very, very aware of everything, and they know that we know they know. This struck a really good balance of everything. Even like the commentary of the toxic fanboys, even that didn't feel like it was too much hammered in. Like it's mentioned, it is one of the motivations, but it's not like they didn't, it's not too over the top, I guess, as much as not over the top these movies can be. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. I felt like this felt like a real Scream movie. It is a sequel / reboot, but it also knows that it's trying to do that, and it doesn't go too far. It feels like it avoids a lot of the mistakes that some of the sequel reboot things have done in the past, so just overall, this was just damn great. It really was. There was one thing. There's one little thing that I still can't quite wrap my head around, and I was not the one who pointed this out. My girlfriend actually pointed this out. We were leaving the theater, and she pointed this out, and I was like, oh, okay, you know what? No, I guess I don't have an answer for that. At the very beginning of the movie, when they're about to attack the younger sister, she gets a live feed video chat invite, and it is the killer has taken one of the girl's phones and is filming that girl, and the killer, you know, it's from their point of view, and has a knife in their hand. It's like, if you don't play my game about what scary movies you like, I'll kill this girl, right? And you're like, okay. But then when you finally reveal who the killers are, the girl who was being filmed was one of the killers. And then the other killer, Jack Quaid's character, he was not in town until after this initial scene. They don't drive into town until later. So how was this being filmed? You know, I guess you could say it was like a green screen type thing, maybe. But it was the one thing about this movie that I'm like, there has to have been a third person doing this, because like, he wasn't in town and she was the one being filmed. So who was filming her? Who was doing this part? So I will say that is the one thing that, like, maybe someone who's seen the movie again can explain, like, wait, how does that work? How would that even make sense? Because that is the one thing that I don't quite understand how that happened. But anyways, yeah, other than that, movie was really fun. It was a worthy sequel in the Scream franchise, and it definitely feels like we can move forward with these new characters, and we're not like fully reliant on bringing Sydney back again. And I kind of hope that, you know, she can have brief cameos, but I kind of hope she lives and she doesn't have to, you know, they don't have to kill her off. They can let her live and just go off into the sunset and everything's fine, you know? So yeah, let me know what you guys think about Scream. Let me know your feelings. Let me know how you feel about this. Are you a fan of the franchise? Do you not care about this franchise at all? And, you know, just let me know how you feel. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.